Hi, I'm Keith Reed, owner operator of Rack to Retail, which provides content that fuels retailers and marketers and associated areas of interest. Today, I have Allan Schaeffer. Allan is the executive director of the Engine Technology Forum and worked with Allan numerous times over the years, covered a lot of ETF's content. But Allan, tell us a little bit about the organization and what you guys do.
Hi, Keith. Thanks for having us. Yeah, the Engine Technology Forum is a group of manufacturers, suppliers, fuel producers, and affiliated associations all centered around one idea. And that is that the internal combustion engine is extremely important to the world we have today, and it's going to continue to be important to the world we have tomorrow. And the relationship between fuels and engines and technology, we're sort of a holistic educational organization, and we cover the waterfront, everything from light duty vehicles and pickup trucks and diesel on up to power generation and data centers and everything in between. So we look at all kinds of engines. The one thing we don't look at is aircraft engines, but everything that's on the ground is considered within our scope.
Excellent. And I'm a big fan of all of the above, but within that all of the above, I'm certainly a huge proponent of combustion. So uh, want to have you on today really to talk about your initiative, Engines Power America at 250, obviously linked to our recent 4th of July anniversary as a country. And, at first I kind of wondered, well, is it stretching it a bit to say, engines at 250? But I had kind of forgotten the fact that we actually started exploring combustion back in the 1700s. By the end of the 1800s, diesel and gasoline powered engine technology was already established in its earlier phases. In fact, the Wright brothers' first aircraft that flew in 1903 was powered by a gasoline engine.
Mhm.
And I had access as editor of NPN, historic magazine that dated back to 1909, to its history, its archives. And it's really interesting if you look at it. In 1909, the magazine was still showing, primary focus was on kerosene and even had whale oil listed as a product, and
Wow.
it was really the independent voice against Rockefeller at small refiners and such. And then you had the Model T, and then you had World War I, which was the first mechanized war. And, by the 1920s, the magazine was about motor fuels. So, yeah, Allan, give me your perspectives on what you feel about the history of combustion and its the role it's really played in society and why you decided to celebrate it in this manner.
That's a great setup, Keith, and you're a great student of history, and there's just such a ton of history there with this technology and fuels and sort of how things came to be. And when you go back 250 years, it's quite impressive all the inventions and innovation that have taken place, the Otto cycle engine, the diesel engine. And then really what those things enabled is the more interesting thing. And that's what we really chose to focus on for our campaign, to just raise the awareness of folks about this technology, about what engines have contributed in the last 250 years, and really what they're going to contribute in the next 250. So we kind of thought about it for a while and kind of broke it down into a couple different places, different areas. And the first and most obvious one is the one that we're all familiar with, and that's personal mobility. A car, even back in the 1920s, the Model T gave people newfound ability to go different places. And that freedom really became a spark, I think, for a lot bigger things to happen. And on the heels of that, we had, sort of this shift to suburbanization. We got to see people would move out of cities and live in suburbs because now they had a way to get around. They didn't have to all be concentrated in one place. They could move outside the city area, and suburbs started to become a thing. And all of the infrastructure needed to support suburbs, and most notably our crown jewel in the U.S., our interstate highway system. That created such a pathway for not only people, but goods and services to be everywhere we wanted them to be and to be across the whole country. And you can't think about the history of our country without thinking about the role that engines played in the industrialization and economic growth part of America either. So when you had the engine being created and being in the automobile, that whole period of time created this huge demand for things like oil and steel and rubber that really created industrialization in the U.S. as we know it. Really founded a lot of industries and made them just grow with leaps and bounds because now there was this newfound industry, this automobile industry and truck industry to serve, and that wasn't the case before. And if you step outside of that space for a minute, think about all the food that we enjoy today. The productivity of America's farms is second to none. And, they are feeding billions of people around the world, not just here in the US. And most of that, it's been enabled through the mechanization from the ag industry, going from horses and plows and mules to tractors. I think it was 1945 when those curves crossed, when mules and horses were on the downward side and gasoline and diesel engines for tractors were on the upswing. And that point in time enabled farmers to think bigger, more land, more productivity, more inputs, and being able to feed more people. And so, that ag sector is a huge success story. And you mentioned World War One, I think, in the opening there, but the engines have enabled us to project power and power our military, and so we've sort of became a force to be reckoned with around the world because we had this technology that was, durable. It was extremely powerful. It powered all kinds of different machines and carriers and troop things, and just it was really quite astounding what it really ultimately enabled, and it created such an influence on what you might say today is the power that we project as a country.
Yeah.
We can't ignore the fact that it created tons of jobs, right? People went into the manufacturing business to make engines, to make vehicles and make technology, and that created its own industrial kind of ecosystem with other industries kind of feeding off of that over time. And then of course there's the energy side of the equation, and the demand for the automobile and truck engines and off-road engines and equipment. Those all are exist and able to do what they can do with all the good things we have with our liquid fuels and gaseous fuels, our energy supply. And so when you kind of put all these pieces together, you start to see, wow, this whole engine thing started somewhere long ago, but it's carried us forward as a nation, for many, many years and enabled so many things that probably wouldn't able to have ever realized back, 150 years ago. I think you wonder what Rudolf Diesel would think today when he would come by and see, massive locomotives or marine vessels or just your regular highway truck, and what that engine's able to do. So it's been a great journey, and the the other aspect of that journey is the sustainability of this
Right.
technology, right? Its ability to achieve ever lower emissions, greater energy efficiency, and to be more sustainable to start to use a wide variety of fuels. I think we've counted 13 different kinds of fuels that can be used in internal combustion engines, and renewable fuels like bio-based diesel, renewable diesel, ethanol, of course, natural gas, renewable natural gas, hydrogen for internal combustion engines is getting to be a great interest for companies. So we've seen just the diversification of fuels around the engine saying, wow, that engine doesn't need to burn just diesel. It can burn these other kinds of fuels. And maybe with just a little bit of adjustment, it can run hydrogen.
Right.
So that's another factor here that kind of compels us to think about the engine industry in a much bigger way. And so all of those things taken together, I think help position the industry for the future. And the one hallmark I would say that over time, and I've been involved in the industry since the late 80s, and put a date on things, but is just continuous improvement,
Right.
right? It is a technology that just keeps getting better. we're getting more efficiency out of a smaller package. We're getting lower emissions. We're achieving near zero levels of emissions where people thought never really even contemplated that. And so that whole mindset of just making things better, slightly better, incrementally better, sometimes in big ways better, but continuous improvement has really been a hallmark of the industry. And that goes for the fuel side too. I mean, we've made huge transitions from the days of, kerosene lamps
Right.
and the kerosene fuel that was part of that early day. And now we've got, ultra low sulfur diesel fuel that's extremely clean. It's very efficient. It's the thing that powers our industrial economy still today. And these renewable fuels that can be mixed with the traditional fuels, it really gets us into the best of both worlds: energy
Right.
security, ability to be more sustainable. It's really a good time to be in the engine business, I would say.
Let me touch on a few of the things you raised back there. Just a few interesting, I think, points to bring up. We talk about emission reductions today. Yeah, if you look back to when mechanized transport replaced the horse, as you touched on, if you went into a major U.S. city that had horses facilitating its infrastructure, let's just say the the emissions involved with that form of transportation were quite dramatically different than the emissions involved with an internal combustion engine. I mean, it created a huge quality of life improvement for folks that happen to be living in those areas. And you touched on World War II, where we basically the mechanization helped win the war essentially, and American fuels most certainly did, particularly aviation gasoline. But a lot of people don't know that Germany in World War II was still, a lot of its logistics were still served by horses, not trucks. They had trucks, but they were still heavily dependent on horsepower, literally horsepower, for moving across areas. And that was an issue. We not only managed to mechanize our forces from tanks to trucks, but we supplied the Soviet Union with trucks that helped them win the war, and we supplied everybody else with trucks as well. And engines, we took the British Merlin engine that powered the Spitfire and put it in our P-51, but we started cranking out Merlins in the United States in quantities that helped. Again, it's just been an enormous situation. And I'll finish my touch on that a little bit. Is with the World Cup here recently, you see a lot of the videos on YouTube where the Europeans, they marvel at a lot of things actually, but one of the things they marveled at is how big America is, how you can spend a day driving and not even cross some states. And I'm 100% on board with everything you've raised. And that's kind of gets to our later point, as you touched on. Emission technology, even for carbon reduction purposes, has advanced dramatically. Yet for some reason, there hasn't been as much love for our type of solutions with combustion as there have been for others. So what's your thoughts on that? And do you see that getting a little better foothold for what the combustion side has to offer?
Sure. Well, it's things have changed dramatically in the last 2 years. To state an obvious point, I would say.
And I
I
would
think
add, not just in the United States, but there actually attitudes are shifting in Europe and other areas for different reasons.
indeed,
Yeah.
indeed, I think that one of the things that always has made me laugh a little bit about this over time is that you know energy efficiency and becoming more efficient has always been in style, right? And what that translates into is less fuel consumption, and what that translates into is lower CO2. And so I think there's probably a good body of people out there that perhaps well-meaning sort of had a view that the engine industry, was just not making any adjustments, not getting any better, and just sort of this cranking out greenhouse gas emissions. And I think that was kind of a problematic view. I think in my mind, I think certainly the regulatory structure that was put around greenhouse gas regulation really helped start to drive the decarbonization discussion to a much further place. But engine and equipment manufacturers have always been focused on efficiency because that's what their customers want, right? They want more power, more performance, lower cost of operation, less fuel consumption. Those are all the things that have always been important, and now they're, I guess, important in different kinds of ways. Maybe I think that the sustainability of engine technology is turned a new chapter in the last few years. I think, we've really seen this transition towards thinking about fuels and technology in a different way. And the renewable fuel sector has done, a tremendous work to make that possible. And I think, I just saw some data this week from California where looking at their scoping plan for their plan to try and achieve their greenhouse gas goals, of the four different sectors that they looked at, electrification was lagging behind and had stalled out. Gasoline was doing pretty good. I forget the other one, but the one that did the best overall was diesel. The low carbon fuel standard has driven renewable diesel fuel into the population in California, such that I think more than 70% of diesel fuel sold in California now is renewable diesel. And so here you've got this, amazing engine technology that is more efficient than ever, this generation, and you've got generations that are 10 or 20 years old, all being able to use the same new kind of fuel that is more sustainable, lower in greenhouse gas and other emissions. Right off the bat, just literally overnight, switching fuels can change everything. And it has changed everything, I think, for a lot of people and a lot of ways to think about this journey that we're on. The sustainability of engine and fuel technology is really just something that is now part of our culture. I think we think about the changes in engine design, the new technologies that are being used as part of engine performance enhancements. And it's really just across the board, no matter which country you're talking about, what sector of the applications for engine technology, but everyone is thinking about it. I think it's the question really now about, deployment. How do we get more of these advanced engines and cleaner fuels out into more parts of the world? And certainly the developed countries are far ahead. And the areas where we have the greatest opportunity are ones where they don't even have electricity in many cases. And, if you can bring a generator into that setting and power it by the local fuel that they have available, which might be 100% renewable, that's a pretty good setup. And I've actually seen that take place in a couple of countries in Asia where they've used it to pump water, to provide some limited electricity for small villages. So engines really enable people to do a lot of great things. And of course, if you've got an engine there, you need to have fuel to use in it. So that fact is not lost on us as well.
I think we can conclude talking a little bit about something you raised initially, when you were discussing some of the benefits and development of, combustion as it's playing out today. And of course, that's data centers. We're in a situation now with AI where, you really have to have all of the above for energy. That includes combustion, and frankly, all of the above's being expanded a bit right now to include modular nuclear reactors and everything else. So could you expand a little bit more about how, combustion is playing out with this new technology sector?
Sure. I think, the primary area is of course power generation. And we've seen really in the last handful of years a real incredible uptick in demand for advanced diesel technology. And diesel has always been the gold standard, the gold backup standard for any kind of mission critical application, whether it's a hospital setting or obviously 911 centers. Those all rely on continuous electrical power. And the fact that, diesel has been the gold standard for backup generators for years, and is still today, I think says a lot about the technology and the fuel and the servicing and the network that supports that. You have a situation now with the rapid growth of hyperscale AI-based data centers where these have incredible demands for power. And so what we see is companies that are stepping in to deliver not just backup power, but also transitional bridge prime power, where you can run natural gas gensets, for example, on site and generate electricity as prime power for a data center until you get a utility connection, and still have diesels as backup to support the loads of the data center. So those situations are now really a daily occurrence, and the companies, every engine manufacturer is really much more of a broad solutions provider these days. They know all about the power demand. They know about switching back and forth from the grid to backup sources. They know about proper sizing. They know about redundancy, and they know about uptime. They really understand that because they've been had to do that in some of these other settings for so many decades that they really understand the importance of that. So it is a place to be for the engine industry right now, and we're seeing sustainability here as well. A number of data centers are speccing the use of 100% renewable diesel in these systems. So if they are being run for tests or actually for being deployed during power outages, they're using the cleanest, lowest carbon fuel that we have available to run in those units right now. And we're seeing more data centers request the highest level of tier emissions performance, so a tier 4, for example, plus using HVO or renewable diesel, as it's called, really presents the best sustainable option that's available today for data centers in backup power. That is just going gangbusters, I would say, with many of our member companies in the industry, and there's no end in sight.
No, they're certainly not. And again, as I say, I don't. It's certainly the Wild West and a hot deal right now. Probably a bit of a bubble out there, but this is a trend that's definitely going to play out. Well, I'll say definitely, and then of course look like a fool in a few years. But in my
I don't
opinion,
know.
I don't think this is going away. Though the landscape might change a little bit over time. But
I agree with you 100%.
well, thank you very much. Now, if somebody wanted to become involved with Engine Technology Forum, how would they go about doing that?
Sure. Well, first step is really to check out our website, and that's enginetechforum.org. You can find out all the information not only about the organization, but learn a lot about advanced diesel engines and fuels that they use, as well as other kinds of engine technology and the fuels that they use. So, enginetechforum.org is the first destination. And if you're a manufacturer or fuel supplier or someone that wants to support the idea that engines have a long future ahead and liquid fuels do as well, reach out to us and we'll be happy to talk with you further about it.
Thanks. And I'll put links in the description for those of you watching. Also, if you happen to be watching this on YouTube, please hit the like and subscribe buttons, help the channel grow, and also click on the bell. You'll get notified, but there's other ways to be notified, uh, noted in the description whenever I launch new content. So thanks again, Alan. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Keith. Have a good day.